Shalom to each of you here on the Zoom call and those who will watch this class lecture on YouTube later. Our usual program during these talks is to conduct an overview of the Bible section in the first 20 to 30 minutes and then let everyone on the call into a conversation about all the themes or ideas that I'll bring up for then the last 30 minutes or so. Further discussion happens even deeper in our discipleship groups that happen next week, or maybe some will conduct a D group on Shabbat. I look forward to that one, where some of you will take the messages we share on Friday morning here in Sydney, and then you will have a gathering that evening with some friends, a Shabbat gathering, and let that discipleship happen almost immediately from that. Last week we began a new study on the book of Numbers in the Torah. Why Numbers? The Hebrew for this book, taken from the first line of the text, is Bamidbar. Bamidbar, in the wilderness. Dear friends, if anything describes the year 2020, for many of us here in Australia and those of you on the Zoom call around the globe, it's the uncertainty and wilderness type considerations that this book will highlight. The Jewish people were never made to live in the wilderness, any more than we in Australia were made to live forever under COVID-19 and under travel restrictions. Wherever you live and are watching this lecture, you have experienced any number of stresses that are not normal, or at least they were not normal before 2020. Thus, I see our entire experience as being in the wilderness. What lessons can we learn from the Jewish people's wanderings as we read them right here in our Bible? That's what the next few months will highlight. So let's jump into this after we pray. Father, take the words that you've already written for us in this chapters 3 and 4, make them alive to us, help us understand them, and help us put them into practice. We pray that in Yeshua's name and for his sake. I'm going to recommend that you who are watching this on YouTube should read the next 2 chapters before you listen or watch the rest of this. They're chapters 3 and 4. Then press play on your machine to rejoin us. Thanks. We saw how this book breaks into 3 major geographic and chronological sections. I won't repeat this every week, but just in the beginning a little bit. The first is found chapters 1 through 10, and geographically we were in Sinai at the time. That's where we begin our second class today. And one more reflection or flashback on the theses, the 3 major topics that Moses is going to give us in this book. The first is that Jewish people today and then and always have been not supposed to live in the wilderness. We've got a goal to be in a land that is our own. Back then it was called Canaan. Today it's called Israel. Wildernesses are okay for those who like to trek, adventurers. Machu Picchu, great. Kilimanjaro, go for it. But that's not the long-range plan of God for us Jewish people. The second major thesis we're going to see very clearly today is the centrality of God in location, in guidance, in physicality, in the structures he establishes from tabernacle on. We are a community that's going to be on the move, often in this book, on the march, but we're never to forget the centrality of the Almighty. And the third major thought concerns authority. We have the one who gave us the 10 Commandments, the Shnei Luchot, the 2 tablets at Mount Sinai, and to whom we have often to return for further clarification and advice. So you'll watch for those 3 theses each week, although some weeks they'll be more or less visible. Today's study, chapter 3, begins with this phrase, Ele Toldot. If you know Hebrew, you know that sounds very familiar. Ele Toldot. These are the generations. You know what that might represent? Look, 13 times in the Older Testament this phrase is used. 12 in Torah, and the last is in Ruth chapter 4. I believe that these are the words at the top of a stone tablet with genealogical records that follow. It's sort of like Ancestry.com for the locals at the time. I'll give you the list of them, or just some of the places. Genesis 6, Genesis 10, Genesis 11, it's there twice. Genesis 25, it's there twice. 36, it's there twice. Genesis 37. So we got a lot of them in the first book of the compilation of Genesis. Exodus 6, it's in there twice, and Numbers right here, chapter 3. In other words, this section, I believe, was originally not written on papyrus or whatever Moses wrote on, but rather on some stones. And then he compiled it. That's what Moses did. He would take these plates, and that, by the way, is where the Mormons get the idea of these golden plates. Moses then compiled into what we call Torah. These are the generations. So that was transferred through the firstborn son to the next generation. It's significant to me as I ponder the authenticity and the historicity of the text. This is ancient. These were very accurate. It's like finding a birth certificate to prove something, or what DNA testing does to many who use it. Another thing to note here is that Aaron is listed first. That makes sense genealogically, right? These are the generations. I mean, if you're going to have a genealogical proof, then these are the records of, that's not in the text. These, when I first started reading the Bible in the English, that is when it was, 1971, and I started reading the back of the book, the red letters were in there, and I saw the italics. I thought those were the most important. I didn't realize that the words in italics are not in the original text, and they're just added to help give the sense. So it says, these are the records of the generations of Aaron and Moses at the time when the Lord spoke with Moses on Har Sinai. The only time that Aaron is listed first, and it happens only 6 times in the whole Bible, in the Older Testament. Every time it's about their genealogical listing, or what we call firstbornness, or primogeniture. I'll give you those. Twice in Exodus 6, here in Numbers 3, Numbers 26, and 1 Chronicles, chapters 6 and chapter 23. It's clear that Moses is highlighting his brother's importance and his influence, his genealogy taking precedence. We've studied and learned that Aaron's family with his 4 sons are the foundation of the priestly clan within Judaism, and putting Aaron first before Moses gets this ball rolling. A couple other things to note. Verse 3. The word for ordained is a compound word. It's maleyad, or to fill the hand. I like that. You ordain someone by filling your hand with theirs, perhaps, or you anoint them, things like that. Also in verse 4, the length of the son's work was during the lifetime of Aaron. But the Hebrew is on the face of Aaron, al panei Aharon, meaning while Aaron was watching. I like the dramatic word rather than the simple chronological one. Now, we see in historical rewind, Levi, you might remember him, he's the 3rd son of Jacob. And that was Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Levi. That's hundreds of years ago. We've already seen his mention omitted in the counting of chapter 1 of the book. He's replaced, as is Joseph, in the listing of the 12 tribes. Joseph gets a double portion, and Levi gets nothing. Well, except that Levi gets an entire credential that seriously outshines all the other sons. He is both the Levitical family and, through Aaron, the entire priestly family. In verse 7, we read, V'shamru I don't need to repeat it in Hebrew. It's just the word shamar is repeated twice. They shall perform the duties is what it says here in our text. The Hebrew carries the idea of guarding or keeping. Shomer, like a policeman today in Israel. The watchman who keeps his eye out. Psalm 121, you might know, he that keeps Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. So it's not only a single act done on one day or another. It's a verb that sounds like a laboratory scientist keeping accurate records and controls. Maintenance is in view, as if the tradition is going to last longer than any day or week or annual activity. They're supposed to guard the guarding, make sure that the thing that is kept is actually going to be guarded by you, because that thing actually keeps you. Some have said that the commandments that we practice actually keep us. We don't keep them. In verse 9, the word here is wholly given, holy with a W, entirely, if you will. You shall thus give the Levites to Aaron and to his sons. They are wholly given to him from among the sons of Israel. The Hebrew's really clear. Netunim, netunim. It's repeated. I mean, it's not even a variant like the word was with shomer. The Hebrew often uses a double word to emphasize the dimension or the seriousness, the extent, or the importance of something. The Levites were entirely there to serve the priests. The choice of Aaron and his sons is highlighted in verse number 10. With the contrast of who is disallowed from the actions in the Ohel Moed, in the tent of meeting. Zur is the Hebrew word, and for some reason we translate it as layman. The layman who comes near shall be put to death, or will die. But the word carries other connotations as well. It's often translated strange, foreign, alien, one of a different kind, unauthorized, or illegitimate. The ordinary Israelite, like I am, the non-Levite, those from the other 11 tribes are the other team in regards to the tabernacle. Verses 10 to 14, God chose the firstborn in Egypt a year before. Well, here's what I mean. In the same way that Pharaoh was willing to sacrifice his firstborn and all the firstborn in Egypt by disregarding Moses and therefore God, God has chosen the Jewish people, and specifically the firstborn, to belong to him. But that would make for an unusual burden on families, on burdens on the military, burdens on the priesthood. So God designed a payback or a redemption system. The Pidyon haben, the redemption of the firstborn. We'll talk about that in a moment. That's been part of the Jewish religion since our earliest days. Verse 12, I've taken the Levites from among the sons of Israel instead of every firstborn. They're mine, God says. They belong to God. And what God will do is to maintain the Levitical servant family who serve the Lord and their priestly cousins. In verse 15 and following, he numbers them and lists them tribe by tribe. The Gershonites, 7,500. The Kohathites, 8,600 perhaps. Merari, 6,200. Those are the three sons of Levi back in the day. And from Kahat comes Aaron, Miriam, Moses, Amram. So So the total, 7,500, 8,600, 6,200, some of you are calculating, and you get 22,300. Problem is, look at verse 39. It says the total is 22,000 even. Commentators work on that, but the omission of a single consonant makes the numbers work. Most agree that this number of the Kohathites should be 8,300, and that makes the numbers sync. Then after the Levitical count-off, there is a census, again, of the firstborn Israelites. Turns out there are 22,273 firstborn, which means there's a problem. Martin Pakula writes in the book Homeward Bound this. Verses 44 to 51 explains what is to be done to make up for the missing 273 Israelites whom God owns. Money is to be paid for each of them to redeem them, end quote. Well, chapter 4 of the book of Numbers outlines the exact workload of each of the Levites, including packing up the gear for the tabernacle, transporting the gear, and such. Remember, the Levites served the priests, who alone were allowed and even commanded to offer the sacrifices and pour the blood to keep the oil burning, the incense aflame, the bread, you get it. As the chapter 4 concludes, the arrangement of the houses of Levi was fixed, again, as we've said, with God in the center. Don't ever miss this. Our lives are settled and arranged well when God is in control, when He is at the center. But I often wonder, and I don't know if you do you ever ponder how big the center is? Most of you on this call are believers in Yeshua. Some of you watching the YouTube are believers, and some of you are not. You are all welcome. And we've been taught as believers to keep the Lord at the center of our hearts and our lives. Listen and look. A dot in the middle of this plate is mathematically and officially the center, but it's barely noticeable. My finger can cover it. I think we get in trouble when we make God the momentary center, but dismiss Him all the rest of the day, the week, the month of our life. I know it's only an illustration, but how much of the life of your plate is housing the Lord of your plate? Is it a drop or a moment of prayer just now? Is it even thinking about God just now? Or when you get on the bus and you run and you chase it and you catch the bus and you say, thank God. Or is it a weekly gathering with others? Is it 3 or 4 or 5 times a day that you stop and pray? You read the Bible, you meditate on God, you ponder who He is? Are you sharing what you believe with other people? Is it He that subsumes your thought life and considerations? How much of the plate is the center? How much? That's what you need to ponder, consider, and self-evaluate. I need to mention the hauling of the gear here in our text. As some of you will know the story in 2 Samuel chapter 6, there a man named Uzzah dies because he reaches out and grabs the Ark of the Covenant. Touching the holy things seems to be out of bounds, and it is. Some argue that he was doing a good thing, and God was really not fair in judging him by killing him right there. I mean, he's trying to... the ark is falling. He holds on to it. He saves it from obliteration. But the issue, of course, is what had God already said about carrying the ark. For that, I'm going to read to you from Warren Wiersbe's book called Be Counted, which is his writing on the book of Numbers. He says this: the Gershonites and the Merarites had wagons for carrying their burdens. We just could read that in chapter 4. But the Kohathites had none. That's from chapter 7. We're going to get to that later. The sacred furniture of the tabernacle had to be borne on the shoulders of the sanctified servants of God. When David had the ark brought into Jerusalem, he, that's David, did not obey this rule and it led to the death of Uzzah. The Kohathites were burden bearers, but their burdens were precious, very important to the people and appointed by the Lord. Certainly they considered it a privilege to carry the sacred furnishings of the sanctuary on their shoulders through the wilderness. In other words, the problem was back in David's day, they put the ark on a wagon, and when it was falling off the wagon, there was trouble. All right. Dear friends, this is the overview of the beginning of the book. It's very important for us in this season, especially as regards the plagues that are listed, and with COVID-19, what the world has been and continues to experience, plagues and faith. Not being where it's supposed to be, travel or not travel. Stay with us during these weeks and learn with the others how you can stay on track in 2020 and beyond. And in the discipleship groups, you'll work this out with others as a community on the march. The Levites, remember, they're all the family of Levi. The Aaronites, that's the children of Aaron, Itamar, Eleazar. Nadav and Abihu had no sons. Itamar and Eleazar, the fourth and third sons of Aaron, they become the priestly line. And it has to be filled in so they get the firstborn of all the different peoples to join them, and if not to join them, then to pay. Pidyon haben, the redemption of the son, is still practiced in Judaism today. And I had to do that with my son when he was born. That's just standard issue. He belonged to the Lord because he was the firstborn, but since I didn't send him off to Levitical Aaronite priestly school, I had to send money for him, to buy him back, to redeem him back. So redemption is a very sacred idea within Judaism, and you and I, most of us on the call, know that God has redeemed us with his firstborn, who should have been a priest, who could be a priest, but according to a different order. There's a lot in Pidyon haben, and I think we'll talk about it again one other time when we get to some more about priesthood. One other thing that we commented on in the question time last week that I think belongs on this YouTube video, and that is the notion of priests. Do people today, that was the question last week on our Zoom call, do people today know from what tribe they are? Answer, no. The only people who know are those from the tribe of Levi, because Levi, Lewis, Lewison, Levinson, that is carried in the last name in modern days. Priest, Cohen, Khan, those are all carried as well. But I have no idea from what tribe I am. Those of you who are Jews on this call don't know from what tribe you are unless you're a Levite. So we say we don't know from what tribe, and that matters. It matters in two regards. Two things are clear. And by the way, when did we lose that? We lost the information at the destruction of the temple in 70 in the Common Era. When the records were destroyed, the temple was destroyed, and Jewish people no longer, after a time of dispersal, don't know that they're from Asher or Naphtali or Reuben or whatever. Nobody knows. People can allege they know, but unless there's a stone tablet, that is, unless there's a physical record, then you're just whimsy. So two things are impacted by that. Number one, the Messiah had to come from the tribe of Judah. You all know that. The tribe of Judah. Since no one knows from what tribe they are, no one can validate or verify that they're from that tribe. So he had to come, the Messiah had to come before the destruction of those records. 70 CE. Messiah had to come before 70 AD. Second thing that we understand from this, and some of you are Newer Testament readers, and you will know that in Revelation that there is a list of 12,000 Reubenites, 12,000 Shimonites, etc., 12,000 from Gad, Naphtali, Asher, etc. 144,000 people are listed, not by name, but by tribe, And since no one knows from what tribe they are, and certainly the tribal mixture has continued since the dispersal, no longer do we have the year of Jubilee to bring us back into those tribal considerations and configurations. Since we don't have those tribes any longer, we cannot, I believe, read Revelation chapter 7, chapter 8 as literal. It can't be literal. There aren't 144,000 Reubenites, 12,000 Reubenites. We don't know who they are. Some argue, well, God knows. That's smooth, but it's probably not the way that John wrote it in 90 when he wrote the book of the Revelation. Well, I hope to see you next Friday, 10 a.m., as we study chapters 5, 6, and 7. Yeah, you got 3 chapters to read, but I think you'll do fine. And we're going to learn about blessings and jealousy and separation. Hope to see you then. And until then, please have a safe and sacred and kind battle for God's kingdom wherever you live. Shabbat Shalom.